My name is Steve Roth. I am a director at Dell, and I am one of the really 6 or 8 individuals on an executive team at Dell that Michael has come to in the last couple of years and said, we've got to transform as an organization. The market is transforming towards the cloud. We need to transform towards the cloud. You've probably heard a lot about our company in the news lately about our transformation towards the cloud. And you're going to see a lot of information today that's agnostic to Dell. It's really about helping organizations figure out, are they ready to kind of take that journey to the cloud? And I talk about that. Come on in, folks. There's some spots down front. There's some up here. I talk a lot about that transformation to the cloud because it really is more than just, am I ready to outsource my equipment? Is it more than thinking about CapEx versus OpEx? Is it more than getting a different voice at the table within your organizations, within the state, whatever it may be, as you're putting out RFPs and RFIs? We're going to talk about all those things here in the next 45 minutes. I typically do this in 30 minutes or 3 hours. It really just depends. Now today we've got a 50-minute slot, so I'm going to move through some things quite quickly. We are downstairs, so please come down and say hello to us. There's 3 folks right here from Dell. If they want to turn around and wave their hands, you can come down and talk to us in the Solution Center. There's a couple more in the back I see, so please come talk to us because we will move through a lot of this information quite quickly. And I promised Haley I'm going to try to stand in one spot because they're videotaping this, so I will try not to move around too much. I always start with this slide. And this slide is important to me because I do represent Dell, and I am on the executive team for cloud. And it's important to me because really the founder of Dell himself is saying the transformation to cloud is not just one linear avenue. It encompasses a whole lot of different things, and we'll talk about that today. Most people think of the cloud, what do they think of, guys and gals? They think about software. They don't think about the infrastructure layer. You think about Salesforce.com if you're in the corporate world. You think about CRMs if you're in the private world or in the public world. How am I going to get all this information? You too have customers that are out there. Those are all the citizens that are sitting out there in the state. How am I going to capture all that information? What repositories is it sitting in? Do you have a SharePoint? Can that be in the cloud? What am I doing with my Exchange? Can that go in the cloud? So you really need to think a little bit differently about all the different areas that are going to push you towards the cloud. And that's what we've done as a company. We've created a vision inside of Dell to help all of our partners that are out there, not our customers, but our partners, take this journey together. A lot that you're going to hear me talk about, and I truly believe this, is about a partnership. How do we together create a vision that helps you evolve into the cloud? One thing to keep in mind, I will never, ever, ever tell you, take all of your live environments, take all of your test dev environments, and throw them into the cloud at one time. It's not logical. It's not prudent. This is a journey. It's going to take time. It's not like when you're buying a big box and you're throwing everything on it. This will take time. So we're going to talk a little bit about terminologies that are out there, some of the challenges, our point of view as a company, what the cloud is really all about. We'll talk about some assessments that we can help you with and talk to you about from that partnership standpoint, some best practices, and I probably won't even get to the customer stories, to be honest with you. Please also humor me a little bit. A lot, and I deliver this quite a bit all over the globe, a lot that's in here transcends both public and private. So there may be some things that aren't completely aligned for the environment that you're in from a terminology standpoint, but theoretically it's all the same. So again, I'm the director of North American Cloud Services. So we've got infrastructure all over the United States, all over Canada, down in Latin America. We're building out in EMEA, so cloud is obviously going global. We've got some different offerings that are out there, and I'm not going to bore you from a sales perspective because you don't want to hear about it. But we as a company did determine that at the end of the day, we had to have multiple solutions. Who understands multi-tenant architecture? Okay? The ability to kind of share space and only pay for what you use. So we built one of those environments. Very cost effective, very nimble for you to be able to burst capacity. So you have seasonal times within your different divisions. During those seasonal times, you want the ability to burst up. Capacity, RAM, storage. We give you that in a multi-tenant environment. Public environment, very big in our public space. You have to have things that are just yours. Nobody else can have access into it. We have those environments. But we went one step further, and we've also developed a hybrid environment. And a hybrid environment will give you the ability to toggle back and forth between both of them. So you may be in a private environment, but may need to spin up virtual machines in a public environment, multi-tenant, very inexpensive to do that. You can even self-procure those things now, right on our website. Very easy to do these things. And then we've also got a whole professional services alignment that we'll talk about a little bit more. And again, I'm not going to talk to you about sales stuff. This is important. I'm sorry, Haley, I'm moving around a lot. 450 global customers. We have competitors. There are lots of competitors that say that they're cloud environments that are out there. In 1 year, we added 450 customers, public and private, that came into the cloud environment in all these different formats. So this is something that Dell is transforming into. 450 may not seem like a lot, but there are some very big name competitors that are out there to Dell that over a year or two have maybe 100. So we're really starting to make an impact. When we come in and talk to you about your environment and talk about what kind of journey do you want to take to the cloud when we get deeper here in a minute, we know what we're talking about. There's still some seats up front if you want to come in and sit down. I won't bite. Anybody heard of some of these companies? Some of them? A couple people know Facebook. We've been doing this for 25 years and nobody knows about it. We host 21 of the 25 largest private clouds today. I'm guessing most of you would have a private cloud as you evolve to the cloud because of your state responsibilities, public responsibilities. 21 of the 25 largest in the world are powered by Dell today. Okay, so enough about Dell and all that kind of stuff. Let's talk about you. What kind of challenges are out there? They're out there every day. The biggest thing I always tell people is that nothing is ever fast enough. You can never spin up enough capacity and storage and whatever you need. A project gets thrown at you in 2 seconds. Who has that problem? Somebody comes in. Haley's got that problem. Somebody comes in and says, I need this and I need to have this done within a week. Here's the timeline and get it done. You can't, right? You don't have the resources. You don't have the resource pool. You don't have all those things. It's a big challenge. It's never fast enough. Process is hard. You don't have full access to anything. It's just, this transcends everything that you do in a technical environment, public or private. This happens to all of us, whether we want to raise our hands or not. This happens to every single person in this room. So why do you want to go to the cloud? What gives you the reason to go to the cloud? Cost. So right now, if you're in an on-prem environment, you're buying capital, right? It's a capital expense. In our world, it's an operating expense. So you may have to buy a $150,000 server to be able to put whatever there is on it. And in the cloud world, and this is Dell. Remember, Dell computers, built on laptops, built on servers, built on networking, built on infrastructure, is telling you, don't do that anymore, right? You have another option. You can still buy servers and laptops. Sorry, Cheryl. You can still do all that, right? But you have the advantage of an OpEx model now. How do I lower my cost burden? How do I help the taxpayer save money when it has to do with my line of business? How can I do that? I can, in effect, now go in and spend $10,000 a month over X period of time versus spending $1 million on all this capital expenditure that's out there. How do I build it? Virtually. Dell has 15,000 virtual machines inside of our company. $60 billion company, I know, public, private, 120,000 employees. We are going virtual. Most organizations, public and private, are going virtual in today's model. So how do I build it faster? How do I save money? How do I operate the systems and integrate them with everything that I have? How do I do that? How do I move my software licenses over? These are all answers that we want to come in and sit down and talk to you about how we can help you transform your business to be more nimble, cost less, not your business, your divisions within the state, cost less, and be able to make a greater impact much quicker. Why the cloud? Why do I want to go to the cloud? The number one reason people want to go to the cloud, OpEx versus CapEx, the number one reason. Less expensive. Multi-tenant architecture. the ability to only buy space. I tell people, if you think about multi-tenant architecture, it's a condo. You own a piece of that condo. You share the pool, you share the tennis courts, you share the parking. But you don't pay for that. You may have a small assessment fee for that, but you own that. If you want a private environment, single-tenant architecture, you may want the penthouse. You own the whole floor. And that's OK to do that based on whatever environment you need it for. But the net of all of it is single-tenant versus multi-tenant, or the ability to hybrid the two of them. So this is just really a view on, why do I really want to go to the cloud? Easier to use, easier to build, easier to operate, and very easy to integrate all your platforms that are in there today. You will see, and you can mark my words, in the next 2 years, SharePoint in the cloud, Microsoft Dynamics in the cloud, Exchange in the cloud, all of these platforms are moving to the cloud. And don't be fooled. All we're really talking about is outsourcing your infrastructure as a service layer to a provider like us or anybody else that's out there, right? But it saves you tons of money, and we have the expertise around that to save money and integrate all your tools together as one. Am I boring you yet? Couple nods, yeah? So what's the first step? You got to have a strategy, right? IT is all about strategy. How are you going to put the plan in place? Who are you going to take it to? I go as far as saying, you may want to sit down in your office and spend 30 minutes or an hour and kind of whiteboard out, what is your strategy? Do you know your IT strategy? Cloud or not cloud? Once you understand where you want to go based on what your deliverables are back to your organization, then you can develop which direction do you want to go. Do you want to have a private cloud? Do you want to have a public cloud? Do you want to have a hybrid cloud that goes in between like we just talked about? How important is virtualization to you? Are you already virtualized? Do you want to go to OpenStack? Are you on VMware? How many VMware organizations do we have today? Does anybody know VMware has a market share in the market today? Do you know what percentage that is? Anybody? 85% of the market share today is VMware. Now, the beauty about VMware is that we're completely partnered with them. We've been together for over 10 years, and I have a slide about that. Those licenses on VMware move right over to the cloud. No problem. A lot of people talk about, am I moving too much? A lot of people are talking about OpenStack. Anybody hear about OpenStack? Okay. A lot of stuff going on with OpenStack. We will have an OpenStack platform at Dell. It's going to be a year from now. The reason we're not going after OpenStack today is that it's not a proven commodity in the market space. VMware is a proven commodity in the market space today. Other terms are out here. Anybody know what SaaS means? Software as a service. PaaS, platform as a service. IaaS, infrastructure as a service. There's now desktop as a service, and all these other as a service out there. All that means is that you can dial into any of those remotely at any point in time from anywhere in the world. It gives you the ability to outsource whatever that infrastructure may be. So this is all the beginning of, you got to create a simple strategy on the front side. And once you know your strategy, then you can sit down with architects like Dell or anybody else that's out there, hopefully Dell, and say, this is where we're trying to go. How would you look at this? How would you progress down the path towards the cloud? How can you help me on this journey towards the cloud? Here's our point of view. Why is Dell going to the cloud? Pretty easy. Everybody can pretty much read it. But the net of all this is that the cloud's going to fundamentally transform how we do business, public or private. It's allowing us to be more nimble. It's allowing us to get responses to customers quickly. It's allowing us to, in effect, build out our infrastructures. A lot of companies, a lot of public and private organizations over the past 5 years have been on a lockdown. I would bet most of you in this room have not had a refresh in a while. Cheryl could probably speak to that. But the net of all that is that it's time that all these projects have been stacking up on top of us. Our equipment may not be as nimble as we need it to be, and we need to find alternative solutions. We're transforming how organizations do business. We're giving you options. In the old days, you only had a couple options. There were vendor options. Do I go to HP? Do I go to Dell? Right? Or do I go to IBM? Now your options are, do I want an on-premise solution or do I want a cloud solution? Do I want OpEx or do I want CapEx? It's up to you. You know, the beauty about the cloud, to me, the best part of the cloud to me, is it doesn't matter if you're an organization of 2 people or 200,000 people. It can affect and impact what you're doing in your business every day. So it's up to you to decide what kind of cloud do you want. Do you want to dip your toes in the water and start off small? Do you want to put test dev out there? Do you want to put live production environments out there? How secure is it? We'll talk about that in a minute. But it's up to you. Cloud can be whatever you want. You have to stop thinking about cloud just as a software layer. That's a big part of it. Software as a service sitting on top of the infrastructure. It's a really important part of it, but it's not the only part of cloud. Cheaper and faster, we talked about that. Risk, maximize profits. Really doesn't affect you guys in this environment, but the bottom line is it does mitigate risk, right? Because you don't have to have the risk of an on-premise device, somebody tapping into it, so on and so forth. And we'll talk about security in a minute. Any questions so far? Oh, look at that. That's pretty cool. So you've decided you want to go to the cloud. Now what do you do, right? All right, I sat down. I took that 30 minutes Steve told me about. I put out a whole plan of what I'd like to do. I've talked to my boss about it. We all agree. Now what do you want me to do? Well, here's what we think you need to do. You need to continue to think about assessing where you want to go. Call Cheryl. Call Rob. Call us. Let us sit down with you. One thing that I think is really important is that we don't want to be a vendor anymore. We want to be a partner. Public and private, it doesn't matter. We want to work with you about how we're transforming and helping you transform yourself. How do we do that together? We can do that by assessing kind of what's going on. What does your current environment look like? What are the risks that are out there for you? Do you not have any more money to spend and you need a refresh? Well, this is a great option for you to go that way. You know, what are your internal rules and policies that are out there? How will this affect that? What's the security measures that are out there? Let us talk to you kind of from an advisory standpoint of how we've worked with other state agencies to evolve their overall organizations in a more effective, cost-effective platform, if you will. Okay, so there's 3 main steps, and this is probably the core of the presentation. Number 1 is you got to build that strategy. I've talked about it 2 or 3 times today. You know, it's not just thinking about where you want to go. It's when you get there, what are you going to do? So if I move my test dev, what's going to happen? At what point do I say having virtual machines and capacity and storage in the cloud and all these different platforms that I can analyze now, at what point do I put my live production environments in there? There may never be a point. I have customers that never put their live production environments in our cloud, but they put all their test dev out there because they're going up and down all the time, right? So that's all about your strategy. Do you want that hybrid cloud that we talked about? Do you want a private cloud, a public cloud? And how secure is the cloud? So number 1, you got to build that strategy. Number 2, what's your approach? And we talked a lot about what do I want to move into the cloud? When do I want to move into the cloud? What's appropriate to go to the cloud? This is really important. You cannot run to the cloud. You can for software. You cannot for infrastructure. You have to be pragmatic in how you're approaching it. What's most important for me? Once you know what's most important for you in your organization, you can very slowly kind of move through the process. And the last one is, at what point do you adopt this hybrid? Hybrid is really important because it gives you the nimbleness to move between a public and a private environment. When you have those peaks and the valleys within your organization, within your own workflow, I know when I have the ability to kind of add. You can literally have a private environment and have a 1-day need to spin up 12 virtual machines as an example. And you can literally procure that, go online, use that for a day, and spin it back down. It's that nimble. And that's the beauty of being able to do this. Test dev, want to spin it up, spin it back down, I'm done, and I go on my way. So what happens when it comes to software? And I know this was a question that kind of came up. How do we handle software? Well, we talked a little bit about licensing for VMware. That all kind of comes over. When you get to the software as a service layer, it all ties in on top. And you've got a security layer, I'm going to show you a diagram in a second, that sits in between that and talks and threaded throughout everything that we do on the infrastructure layer. So you know from a security standpoint, you've got the security that you're going to be required to have in a public environment, or even in a public environment, or a private environment, I'm sorry. You own the software. It's running on your infrastructure. It's not ours, right? We have all the relationships with Microsoft and everybody else that's out there, so we can help you procure whatever those licenses are, but it's all yours. We don't own it. You own and maintain the application software. You're responsible for monitoring your applications and the performance of those applications. We're providing you the infrastructure. Remember, this is infrastructure as a service. That's what cloud is. It doesn't matter if you buy it from IBM, from Dell, from Rackspace, from HP. It doesn't matter. We're providing you our racks, our space, and you've got to decide, do you want to have multi-tenant environment or private single-tenant environment? So this is one of my favorite slides, and I'm going to shut up for a second and just kind of think through this arrow. If you are on that journey today, where are you on that arrow? It's a pretty cool slide because it starts to really make you think. And I used to start with this first, but it makes you think. Most people think they're down here when they come hear me speak, but you're probably not. I bet you're somewhere in here. You've already probably had some dialogue. Look how many people are here today. Were there 500, 600 attendees? 1,000 attendees? They're all here about the cloud. So everybody's thought about the cloud already. Everyone's already thinking about it. And again, I would bet most of you are somewhere in here on this curve. So VMware.
Can I throw a question at
you? Yeah, absolutely.
So in the public sector, for one of the typical concerns is around protection of certain types of data because of the nature of the data. What kind of mechanisms or assurances should a public sector customer be looking for when they consider moving some service outside their environment?
I'll get to that completely, but the quick answer is that we house, our data center is in Plano, Texas. We have a redundant failover site in Quincy, Washington, right up the street. That site in Plano is we purchased Perot Systems about 3 years ago. That is the most secure site I've ever been on. Armed guards outside, biometrics to get in. Dell SecureWorks is threaded throughout everything we do. There's a Trend Micro layer on top of that. So we have both physical and non-physical security threaded throughout. And that's primarily our private environment. We have a stamp for our public environment there as well. And like I talked about, we've got a failover site. So for specific security, I'm going to show you a slide in a second that will get to that. But for most, if not all of my public environments that are out there, we also have a full audit that we can provide and kind of walk you through. And we've got a specialist on the public side that can help you understand our full security mechanism in place to secure all your data. We also, like data movers.
BAAs.
Yeah, so BAAs we also can do, which give. So anybody know what a BAA is? So a BAA is kind of a letter of liability, if you will, that kind of secures your data. It's us putting out there that we are going to ensure that in our environment, the liability is on us and that all your data is secure. And that audit piece sitting behind it will give you kind of all those audit compliance issues that are behind it. You have to go through a tremendous amount of audit to get a kind of HIPAA compliant BAA certification to be able to do that. Our Plano data center has every certification that you can imagine. And again, we can share all those with you as we kind of get a little bit more offline in your own kind of Q&As. Hopefully that answers what you're asking. Yes, sir.
Can you go back one step back to the point?
Yes, sir.
How do you, when you get up to the top there where you say self-service consumption, how do you define that? How do you move from not being there to going to that step in?
So self-service consumption is specifically around being able to self-procure VMs. And you can do that in our environment today. So you get to a point, let's say, like I said, you're in a test dev environment, and you need to spin up more VMs, you can consume that on your own, literally going to our website, logging in, and being able to spin up more resources. So it's really your own environment that tells you when you're at that point in time. We can kind of help map out when we feel like you're going to be there and when you need that, but that's one of the multiple options that you could have by just being able to consume your own capacity whenever you need to.
And does that extend to software rather than just VMs? Can you, like self-service SharePoint sites, GIS access?
You can do that if you have, if you have that as part of what you're doing. Absolutely, you can do that. So the big new thing that's coming out is SharePoint in the cloud. It's going to be a huge deal. Nobody wants to buy those boxes anymore. So if you want to go down that path, we can set up that architecture that you're moving your SharePoint up in the cloud. We'll have to have probably a data mover to help you move large reams of data and pull them up into the cloud in a timely manner. I know one of the questions that came up also was around, how do I move lots of data very easily? We've got a 10 gig pipe in Plano, and we do have an MPLS rollout that's going to be occurring here next week. We actually have our big corporate kickoff that we're rolling that out. So the net to your answer is that it's kind of up to you, and I know that's not what you're looking for. But when you get to a point of saying, I need to consume on my own and procure on my own, you have the ability to do that. And that's what I'm trying to say there.
So this is infrastructure as a service, but do you, as Dell, offer software as a service? So will you offer SharePoint in the cloud?
We do.
That I can self-service my own site and use?
You can. So Dell also in the last 2 years in our transformation has acquired about 40 different companies. And in those acquisitions, we are going very heavy on software. So we have a full software as a service division. I'm happy to have Cheryl speak to that as well. And again, we'll be downstairs to talk about that. But yes, you can, both infrastructure and SaaS, you can self-procure all this. And we can help you with all the licensing and everything you want to do, up and down. Any other questions so far? No? Am I doing okay? Am I going to get applause? All right. All right, so VMware is really important to us, like I talked about at the beginning. We've got a partner that's out there that really has been very strategic for us. They provide a platform that is, in my opinion, the best in the market. It's best of breed. We talked about it being 75 or 80% of the market share, if not greater, that's out there today. I put we're one of the largest. We are the largest. We are the largest reseller of VMware out there today. 18,000 VMs that Dell currently has. I said 15,000. The updated number is 18,000. I heard one guy today from Dell say it's 12,000. So in a year, we've gone from 12 to 15 to 18,000. And that's really the challenge question today. Are you ready to virtualize? Is that where your organization, your agency is heading? The ability to virtualize gives you that flexibility and that nimbleness that we had talked about in the very beginning. I think the most important part about what's happening in cloud is OpenStack, and we talked about it a little bit in the beginning. To me, OpenStack will be a direction people want to go in the future. OpenStack is a public environment that you can actually put your infrastructure on. The problem with OpenStack today is that it's just not proven out. There's not an HP or a Dell or an IBM kind of sitting there saying, we're touting it. We're all sitting behind it. We all are very minor players behind OpenStack, but there's not been a public announcement that any one major infrastructure service is endorsing OpenStack in today's world. We're going to get there, but don't be fooled by it. That's my off-the-record, non-Dell opinion. Don't be fooled by it. When you look at VMware, it's something that works. Most of you are on it. The licenses will transfer. We can sit down from an advisory standpoint with our VMware partners with you and create that vision of where you want to go. So it's really a mutually agreed upon path on how you're going to get where you want to ultimately go. This is the big slide, and we'll probably spend the next 5 or 10 minutes around this. So we've got really 3 options that I talked about in the beginning. The first option, I'm sorry, it's kind of a busy slide, but the first option is our private. You want to sit in a Dell data center, Dell stack. You don't want anybody. Number two is that multi-tenant architecture. It's public. You're still sitting on the same Dell stack in the same data center, but you're not paying for all the bells and whistles. But you get all the same features and functions. And then you have that hybrid environment where you can go in between the two. Well, right here, all of this, from a security standpoint, is all threaded throughout everything that we do. This is all Dell SecureWorks. Anybody familiar with SecureWorks? SecureWorks is an organization that we purchased, I think, 2 years ago. I think it was about 2 years ago. #1 security provider that's out there. They are the bomb. No pun intended. They are really, really great at what they do. But then there's a layer of Trend Micro that you can layer on top of anything that you're doing with SecureWorks. And I know everybody knows Trend Micro. If you need that added layer of security sitting on top of there. We talked a moment ago about the physical security of the data center itself. And I know this is very important to the public world. You've got to have certain audit criteria if you're going to be allowed to ultimately move your data into any data center, agnostic to Dell. Well, again, you pull up to the data center, and I can tell you, I live in Plano, Texas. I'm from Dallas. I go to that data center all the time, and those guys stand there with machine guns in that booth. You have to have the right security clearance to get into that building. There are biometrics everywhere. We certainly maintain and ensure that anybody that's working on that floor has gone through all their background checks and all their security clearances. And obviously, from an auditing standpoint, you may have different levels of security clearances for your infrastructure based on the agency that you're working for. Sitting up here, so what's on the top, kind of above the hypervisor? The ability to kind of encrypt data. The ability to kind of make sure that all the intrusion detection and all the security layers are layered in there. The ability to have all the VM firewalls and authenticity for any of the data movement kind of coming in and out. It's all there. Again, these pieces are optional. You don't have to have them. Private environment, public environment, hybrid environment. Everything below this optional layer is part of what we do. You are buying in our environment or anybody's environment in this OpEx model capacity, storage, so virtual CPUs, storage, and RAM. That's what this is. You're taking that off of a box and you're putting it into a virtual environment, and the ability to spin up more and more as you need it. Oh, I thought I had more. Questions? God, I got through that in 30 minutes. That's unbelievable.
We got a lot of time.
OK, yes, sir.
So can you give some examples of regulated organizations that are in your multi-tenant cloud that are culpable of PCI and HIPAA? And because that's the big, we're all regulated, so that's the big threat there.
Right. So yes, I can. Some are under NDA that I can't, which I'm sure you can understand that. We have, of those 450 current customers, I'd say about 20% are in the public world. That would include higher education, such as Columbia University, NYU, some colleges out here in California I cannot share. From a true public, the state of Texas is a current consumer of what we're doing in the cloud. And Rob, you may know a couple more off the top of your head. Do you have anybody in your patch?
Well, getting back specifically to PCI and HIPAA.
So, yes, we do. So in our environment, again, I have to be careful because there are certain organizations that we cannot share who they are, but they are compliant. What I can tell you this, our data center is fully PCI compliant and fully HIPAA compliant in the private world. In the public world, we are not HIPAA and PCI compliant. It's just not. That's pretty standard. I have referenceable accounts that I can share with you in a non-public forum specific to PCI and HIPAA compliant in the public sector as we have some one-on-one dialogue.
Looking into the future, do you see that coming?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have a third-party partner that we utilize for public that is HIPAA and PCI compliant. We tend to find that most of our customers in the public space want to be in a private, single-tenant environment where we have the HIPAA and the PCI compliance and every other certification that you can imagine. In the public world, it's not completely there yet. I'm sorry, Haley. It's not completely there yet, but we are evolving to that. So I know I'm not giving you a direct answer. Public, multi-tenant environment, historically is really not PCI or HIPAA yet, not in the Dell world. It is on the private side of the house. It's the best answer I can give you. Yes, sir.
This may not be the right forum or a little bit technical, but as it relates to this, your security slide, this last week I read that the feds are going to significantly expand their cyber terror portion of the information technology at a federal level. So one of the things that I see in a lot of these forums and events that I go to is a lot of discussion about security. It's one of the top 3 issues. But I have yet to, if government's going to start moving to the cloud, and we're going to start no longer be siloed in a number of different platforms, what kind of addresses and solutions are you looking at as it relates to, if another foreign government comes in and takes down our whole network type of a scenario?
Right. So the best answer I can give you is that we do have a federal strategy. FISMA compliance is very much a part of that, and being able to offer those layers of certification. Again, it will probably be a hybrid public-private environment. We don't have that strategy in place today, and I doubt very many of the big box Dell, HP, IBM providers have a cloud solution around it. We utilize, very similarly to our public, a third party that is a federal government provider of all those layers. So when we have organizations that want to evolve to that, what we do is we bring our third party in, we sit down and have a solution gathering session to determine kind of what's driving that. And it goes back to one of the slides of what's driving you to that. If it's the government for your specific agency saying you need to have these compliance layers in, then we can do that with a third party. As an organization today, we have a strategy, but we don't have an actual product in place for some of those added layers of security. Which is really about, and let me be really clear, all of that debate is around data movement. It's 100% around data movement. It has nothing to do with the infrastructure layer. It's 100% about all this data that you're moving back and forth. Are you using Hadoop or any of the other data mining companies, whoever it may be? How secure is that data? Because anybody can hack into it, right? You've got remote user IDs, remote user passwords. Anybody can hack in and pull all that data, and it's all private data. So the software companies have to work very quickly at providing some lock-ins with these certifications and then layer it on top of what we're doing at the infrastructure layer. I am convinced, public or private, at the infrastructure layer, we're there. I've got enough government agencies, states, cities, universities, and general commercial customers that have lots of compliance issues out there on our public and private clouds, and they're locked tight. They're fine. It's the software issue that's out there. Oop.
So yesterday I learned that we're either the largest or one of the largest keepers of medical images in the cloud. We have like 7.1 billion medical images we're keeping for some number of healthcare providers. And I look at that as like storage as a service. Is that something that you can speak to a little bit?
Yeah, so we've also launched a storage as a service offering, which has really kind of taken off very well. What that provides you is, instead of taking all of your data, storing it, and having people kind of maintain those boxes with all your storage, you're removing them off-prem and you're putting them up in the cloud. No more need to have tape drives, all that kind of old school stuff and the equipment and management of all that. This gives you the ability to take petabytes of data or greater and store them up in the cloud. You can store multiple copies up in the cloud, and we have lots of customers that are around that. That does have PCI and HIPAA compliance wrapped around it. We do utilize a third-party provider for that as well through Dell, who's tied into us. They're a West Coast provider, actually. We are developing a OpenStack storage as a service solution in the future. That's the Dell story. For you, the great news is that, same thing, OpEx versus CapEx. You no longer have to take really large boxes and dump a bunch of data on there that you may never have to go back out and look at again. So this gives you the ability to kind of get rid of all the tapes in that world. It's a great method of being able to take medical images, take historical data from citizens that live in your districts for whatever your department or agency is, and house all that data on hardware. Gives you a chance to put it up in the cloud. Yes?
I have a couple of questions. Back in the 90s, late 90s, the internet technologies came in. There are a lot of public-based websites and applications. But for government, we had intranet, which actually made it possible for us to move into the same web technologies, but in a more secure environment.
Mm-hmm.
While I understand the 3 layers of private, hybrid, and as well as the public strategy you have, and hosted back in Texas, do you have any strategy for hosting clouds, like providing all the services, but not back in one place, but for local governments and similar to internet and intranet? Do you offer any services here? And the second part of the question is, a lot of the local governments have very diverse applications and very old, different technologies.
Right.
And how do you actually lift and shift that to just something like a very homogeneous kind of cloud you're talking about?
Yep, 2 great questions. So number 1 is that yes, we can create what I call private clouds in your environment. So it's literally us being able to take your government environment and dropping in a cloud specific for you. So it's that private environment, but it doesn't have to be hosted in our center in Plano, Texas. So that's a big thing in the public world. You want to be able to know that you've got physical servers that is your cloud within walking distance in some cases. So yes, we can do that. The second part of your question around, how do you, tell me again what the second part of the question was?
Because the local governments have different...
Oh, old technologies. Okay. So from a software standpoint, yeah, we can literally, as we talked about that assessment slide, look at some of the platforms that you're sitting on and get you into the next gen, right? Web 2.0. How do we do that for the public space? We can do that as equally as we do in the commercial space. So we sit down and we analyze, and we talk about what's the use case, where do you want to go, what kind of dollars do you have to spend, and then again, we've got a whole software as a service layer that we can certainly bring in there. From an infrastructure layer, it's easy, because chances are you're probably sitting on very old technology, very old boxes that are at 100% capacity or close to it, right? And some of the folks that are maintaining those boxes on-prem may be retiring out in some cases. You may still be sitting on very large mainframes. So how do we take some of that and evolve it over into a cloud strategy? We take it in phases, because we can't take your environment down at one time and say we're going to do everything at once. We have to phase approach what we're going to do, which is what that arrow is all about. Let's take each kind of paradigm on that arrow as you're going up the standard and create a very specific plan that works for your organization. So SaaS, we can absolutely look at it. We can absolutely look at getting you updated on your technologies. We can absolutely do it at the infrastructure layer as well. And we can build a private cloud on your premise if that's what you want us to do. Yes, we can do that. We've got about 6 or 7 more minutes. Any additional questions you have? Yes, sir.
I'm sure I don't understand the technical complexity, but it seems like when you talk about government requesting or requiring its own cloud, it seems like you start to scrub off some of the value that you talked about leveraging in the beginning of the presentation. Part of the value of the cloud seems to be the flexibility, but is government locking itself in a private cloud? Do you see a conflict there?
No, what I have found with certain agencies is that they have to touch it and feel it. It's just part of what their mantra is. It doesn't limit your ability. You can still utilize a multi-tenant environment in a hybrid solution. So you've got all your key data, all your key whatever on premise in your own private cloud, but that's the beauty of hybrid. You can self-procure and spin up whatever VMs or resource pool that you need directly from your own environment. And that wouldn't be coming out of your stack on-prem. That's the beauty of the solutions. Still gives you the same flexibility. Yes, sir?
Talked about the different models. The one you didn't touch on was, I think, in a lot of respects would be appropriate in many instances as a community model.
Say that one more time.
Community cloud.
So I look at a community cloud as a public, a public multi-tenant environment. That's kind of my purview. We don't have a specific community cloud that's out there, but I look at it as the ability to only pay for what you use. And it's a community cloud, and everybody has the same resource pools. That's where OpenStack is ultimately wanting to get to. We're not there yet as an organization, so I don't speak a lot about it. But I look at it as the front end of what a public multi-tenant environment is.
Yeah, it's a natural part of me buying services in your cloud that you give me like a firewall context that I manage myself, or do you manage that context and I tell you what rules I want to apply to different servers, whether they're database, web, application? How is all that done?
You own it all. It's all your configuration. It's all your platform. It's all everything that you want it to be. And we just set it how you want it to be set, or you set it how you want it to be set.
So you basically carve off a context for me. All my networks and VLANs and everything reside in that context.
Yep.
And then I get to put my servers where I want them and apply whatever rules that I apply.
Correct. Yep. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just curious. Excuse me. My interpretation of the question regarding a community cloud is, as you said, it's a multi-tenant model, but we get to define who is in that community. So, for example, having a government-only multi-tenant cloud available, where we share a lot of the same
right.
concerns.
We're getting there. That is going to be, the community's not there yet. No play on the words, but we are going to get there. The government, in my opinion, in the next couple of years will have a cloud-specific, I think one of the questions was around Fed, that's FISMA compliant, PCI, HIPAA, everything that you need, and you start carving off space. I think ultimately OpenStack had that intent. How do we open it up to everybody? But in your public environment, you have to have very specific rules and regulations that are met. Software and infrastructure. We're not there yet, but this is an option to create a private cloud in your environment, hybrid to a public multi-tenant environment, and be able to still have the same resource pools going back and forth. And the ability to shift from a capital expense to an operating expense all the way through. We'll ultimately get there, but this is V1 of wherever. This is probably V2, right? To me, Web 2.0 was just all new, technologies like Twitter and Facebook and all that. This is Web 2.0 for infrastructure as a service. 0.3 or 3.0 is going to be that carve-out specific for the public environments. Any other questions? So again, Rob is here, Cheryl is here, Mark is here. We have a Dell booth downstairs. We really appreciate you sitting and listening. Hopefully I didn't give you too much Dell, but we'd love to talk more about what we're doing and love to have some face-to-face time to really talk about how we can advise you on where the cloud's going and how we can partner with you on next steps. Thank you very much for your time today.